Good morning, everyone. This is Buck Bierly with MT Bierly Consulting, and we thank you very much for joining us this morning into our topic for this particular webinar, Delving into Financial Operations, Follow the Money. And we're going to be spending some time today really working on the second part of a two-part series, which had to do with thinking like the business owner. And this stems all the way back to a webinar we did 2 months ago where we said, in the end, value propositions and value systems, let's not just sell on price, let's go beyond price. And the question you have to ask yourself is this: what value are we really adding into some of these relationships that we are managing? And so we said, well, one thing is you got to be able to think like the business owner, but where does that really pay off for you? It's when you really start to delve into the financial operations and then begin to follow the money. And what we're going to do today is take more an in-depth look into some of the issues involved in understanding all of the internal business processes of a business owner and giving you a better idea of how to have a very structured conversation around this. It's not product focused, it's business process focused. And here's what I mean by that. In the end, the name of the game is for a business owner. I'm speaking as a business owner right now. The name of the game is I'm far less interested in hearing about your products than in having you understand my business processes and maybe showing you some ways that you can, well, really dig deeper into those. And then, and here's the key part, give me ideas of how to optimize those processes, whether it be collections or disbursements or whether it be my working capital management model. How can you help me optimize those, not just for today, but to where I want to go 1, 2, 3 years down the road? And that's why we're really talking about follow the money. Follow the money as it comes in through the receivables, gets worked through the cash cycle, and then goes out as well the payables. And how do we work that through in a structured, focused way that truly adds value? So let's get started on this right now. And here's our first thing I wanted to remind you of. And for those of you who have been on some of all of this 2010 webinar series that we've been doing since January, you'll recognize this particular slide here where we talk about what are some of the key changes taking place in the industry right now, the focus for 2010-2011. And a quickie on this is basically this. As the examiners come into banks, one of the things they're saying to them is you need to reduce your dependence on construction / investor / or real estate development type loans. And that reduction in dependence on those kinds of loans is creating competition for well-run operating companies that more and more community and regional banks will be shifting their focus to these kind of C&I or operating type companies. And the primary reason we're doing that is, one, because we gave up revenue by not being able to do some of those construction investor loans, and we need loans. We also need deposits. We also need the fees. Now, we're going to go out and get those loans, but we're going to be doing those loans on a more selective basis, only if we get the credit quality and the margins that we need. All right, and sometimes we may have to dip a little bit into those margins, but there's a lot more focus on margins right now than I've seen in quite a while. Liquidity is going to remain important. Got to have those low-cost deposits. But the theme here is revenue replacement, and that will be a theme for all the examined banks. And that revenue replacement is going to take place through the acquisition and expansion of new clients, as well as the expansion of existing clients. And one of the big focal points in most of the banks we're working with right now is not only prospecting for loans, but building treasury revenue and what we'll call consumer revenue with the business owners and business managers of the clients that we're serving. So in the end, what we're doing right now is really digging deeper and deeper into these relationships and getting away from a products and metrics focus, you're a loan officer, just go get me loans, into more of a relationship focus, understanding and aligning with the business owner's business plan type of focus. And what we're seeing in the industry right now is a lot of the banks that are really getting ahead of the game here are replacing their sales processes with well-developed relationship development processes by making a connection with the business owner that goes beyond just a single product or 2 or 3 products. It really becomes back to the traditional role of the banker. So let's take a look at how that plays itself out, because this becomes one of the keys. And of course, follow the money fits right into that situation. We had these couple of slides here as a part of our conversation last month about in the end, thinking like the business owner. And if we take a look at liquidity, and it's going to remain important, the question is this: what process will you use to pull through low-cost deposits and lock down the treasury and deposit relationship? This is a theme we're seeing emerge more and more in the well-run banks in the U.S. right now. So this becomes one of the issues, is how do we basically work those two things, the low-cost deposits and the treasury fees? Radically undersold. There's a study that's done in the industry that says that basically somewhere between 65 and 75% of business owners turn to their CPA for advice on cash management before they turn to their banker. And that's because we've had this product focus. Hey, man, you're a loan officer. Just go get me some loans. Treasury will take care of the rest of it later on after we get the loans closed. Well, we're seeing that break down now, and we're seeing a lot of focus now on getting into that Treasury relationship much earlier and much deeper. Partly because we're looking for revenue replacement and ways to retain and expand these relationships. So we're seeing a lot of focus on that. And that aligns with what actions can you take to better understand and then align with the business owner's business plan, which includes his or her business objectives, business operations, and internal business processes. That's what we call the financial operations these days. All right? So my question is this: if we're going to become better at doing this, we're going to have a clearly articulated relationship development process that makes a connection with the business owner. And here's my question to you: what process will you use to get deeper into the thinking of the business owner and the business management team within that organization? And let me digress here for a second about what I really mean by that. The studies right now, and every practice management consultant we talk to in the professional services world, for example, the people who give advice to professional practices, which are, as I said earlier, a real focus right now for many banks, goes like this. As a professional practice owner, whether you're a healthcare professional, an engineering consultant, a veterinarian, a dentist, management consultant, whatever it is, the people who build and run those professional firms spend a lot more time thinking about how to effectively grow their professional skills and very little time thinking about how to run the business. So this leaves a huge opening for the banker. And if we don't do it, the CPA is going to do it for us, or some practice management consultant is going to do it for us, and then we end up being just a commodity. So the rule of thumb is, how can we get deeper into that thinking and take out our true role, which is helping people with their financial operations? So we're going to dig into that again today, and we're going to talk a little bit more and pick up where our business operations conversation left off. As we do, though, I want to go back even further in our 2010 webinar series and remember the mistakes that we said bankers are making on sales calls. So, because you're going to have to undo some of these mistakes to really have the kind of conversation we're talking about today. First of all, planning one meeting at a time. No. What we talked about before is this: you're going to plan the first and second meeting on the prospect at the exact same time. Because what you do on meeting one totally is responsible for ginning up the interest for getting your butt back in the door for meeting number two. And remember, in new client acquisition, the name of the game is the third, fourth, and fifth meeting. The name of the game is always building enough interest to get you back in the door quickly. So the second mistake we make here is thinking selling is a series of events rather than a relationship building process. Number two, not preparing cognitively, not actually thinking through and visualizing what you're about to walk into and then leading that call. Otherwise, you leave it to the business owner to lead the call. Not appropriate, not the best way to build these relationships. Using the wrong set of questions on calls, assuming you know what's important to each business owner because you made so darn many calls in your life. Stop assuming. You can demonstrate your experience and expertise by the questions you ask and by the way that you listen and ask follow-up questions. Stop assuming you know. Dig deeper into their thinking and what they want to do. And, of course, you'll never sell the first need. We have a rule of thumb with our clients that goes like this. You cannot leave this call until you have 3 needs on the table. Remember, the enemy is inertia. It's hard to change banks. It's hard to move services. The rule of thumb is I'm only going to do that if I can see some compelling reason for doing it. That usually means momentum. I've got to have momentum to overcome inertia. You've got to have multiple needs. Another reason why we want to have these financial operations calls. You can lay in. If you just walk in and say, oh, you need remote deposit capture, that's very little momentum. If you can look at the entire system somebody's using to organize their financial operations, you may find 3 or 4 ways that you can optimize something, gives you far, far more momentum. And if they could show you some ways that they're not happy with how it's working today, that builds the acceleration. And bingo, the next thing you know, we've got something that can unseat the inertia. All right? We're going to skip on here. And just one caveat here is, remember, not all relationships between a business owner and a banker are the same. We've got some competitors out there who are not very good at building relationships. They're pushing product and doing transactions. On the other hand, not all business owners want the same type of relationship with a banker. Remember the data we've talked about in the past. About 45% of business owners are price shoppers. Dyed in the wool, it's in their DNA. They cannot stop themselves price shoppers. And no, whatever level of expertise, experience you can offer, whatever level of customer service, in the end, it's not going to be enough. The 55% are looking for some aspect of relationship or quality of service, and that's what we're building toward here. Not all bankers build the same level of relationship with a business owner, all right? Not all bankers are good at this stuff. So what we're really trying to do is build a partnership where the business owner thinks and feels, this is both of them now, that the banker is aligned with his or her objectives, operations, and processes. In other words, the banker is a partner in building the business owner's success. Now, this isn't worth spending the time on for every customer, every prospect, or every center of influence. The name of the game here is this has to be done selectively with careful focus. All right. What's the reward? The reward is we get closer and closer to this thing we've talked about in the past, which is 60% of the relationship. And if we look at the business and the business owner over here, business owner over here, this is what we're talking about. We want 60% of this business, and if we really understand the business operations and the financial operations, you'll see how they're doing all of these things, and it opens up the door sometimes to outsell some of your competitors. Gets a little bit hairier in the $22 million business because the products are even more sophisticated, but that gives us even more opportunities. All right. Again, we're going to differentiate between a relation development call and a marketing call. No, on the marketing calls. Those are just ways of staying top of mind. This is the name of the game here. We've talked about this many times in the past. All right. Now, we're going to skip over a couple of things here, but I want to go back and remind you what the business owners and decision makers say about building a partnership, and what they basically go down to is this. If I take a look at what I'm willing to pay a little bit more for, I didn't say a lot more, I said a little bit more, but in today's world, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 basis points on a large book of business is huge, and if we take a look at this, what they're saying to us goes like this. I want to do business with somebody. I would think and feel somebody really has my best interest in my life, in their thinking, if they know the history of my business, if they know my industry sector, my line of business, if they're staying responsive to my ongoing changing needs. I am not a loan application. I am not a set of financial statements. I am not a depository or account analysis statement. I'm changing, man. I'm changing, and you need to be in front of me and having this conversation periodically. And we would say, remember the old theorem that we've used in the past with you guys many times, and that is this. It's what you do between transactions that builds the relationship. It's not just how you handle the transaction. That's where you find out what's coming up next and how those things are likely to change before they change, staying ahead of the competition. Understands what I want and how I operate my business, proactively introduces services that apply to me in advance of my changes in my business, knows me and I know them on a personal level, is willing to work with me, and considers me important and valuable enough to spend time with me between transactions. I don't have to call you up. You're calling me up as much as I want, not any more, not any less, puts my needs and interests ahead of your sales goals, and has personnel who are well trained. There it is. And that business operations conversation we talked about in our last webinar and our financial operations conversations, they are all geared toward providing these things to these business owners. All right? Which, if you do appropriately, demonstrates a value proposition that we call industry, or rather we call experience and expertise. I'll understand your business better than any other banker. I'll help you anticipate your needs better than any other banker, and I'll help you navigate through increasingly complex financial choices better than any other banker. All right. So if we align with the business owner's thinking, this is what it looks like. Here's the old inverted triangle that we've been working with now in several webinars. To demonstrate an experience and expertise value proposition, think like the business owner. They think from top down. So they want to go from history, current, future, all the way down to, well, solutions and satisfaction. They're thinking from top down. So in order to do that, we have to understand these key points. Why do we even have a conversation about history? Here's why. Why are we even talking about current objectives? Here's why. Why are we even talking about the 1-3-year view? Here's why. Why are we really focusing so heavily on the business operations when we know, well, because we know the business operations are going to change based on the industry trends up here in number 2 and 3, and they're going to be solved by the key to success in number 1, and those changing business operations, here we go now, are going to drive a change in the financial operations if you understand what they are and how they're working within the business today. If you just have a superficial view of that, then you're going to be forced to just throw products at the situation, and you're going to miss that momentum that comes with finding multiple needs. The changing financial operations forces the business owner and business managers to restructure their thinking about their financial needs, and then eventually to take a look at the services they have at their current bank and say, these aren't working anymore. Now, what if we can, I hate to use this word, provoke this conversation at a deeper level than our competitors? What do we end up with? Momentum. That's what we end up with. And we end up with a sense of, I've added more to your business in terms of value than a few basis points. I've added actually many basis points. So that's what we talked about here. What you need to understand explicitly as you align with their thinking. Now let's talk about how the financial operations fits into this. In our last webinar, we said, look, here's the purpose of history, right here. Won't touch on that. Here's the purpose of the current objectives. We had a long conversation about that. It helps you align your questions with those. Here's the future. Now we tied it into business operations, all right? And these business operations will change over time, driven by the current and future industry trends, and that leads us to the financial operations, all right? Financial operations are driven by the business operations. Listen to that. Financial operations are driven by the business operations. Don't think like a banker. Think like a business owner. And these financial operations will change over time as the business operations change. That's why this section up here is so critically important. All right, so let's get started here. The financial operations discussion, the follow the money, so to speak, actually is a process, and I'd like you to look at it right now as a process view. All right, and so we can look at it step by step. All right, so let's take a look at this. Whoops, sorry about that. And the steps look basically like this. You could use this process on an existing relationship that you want to do a better job of retaining, or on a relationship where you want to do a better job of expanding the relationship, building increasing value and customer loyalty as a result. Or you could use this as a second or third call on a prospect. But the name of the game is, this is going to take some time to do, and I don't think it's worth doing this with every single client you have or every single prospect you have. It has to be reserved for the ones that really are going to, well, if you do this the right way, generate significant opportunities for you. All right, and in a previous discussion, we've talked about what that target profile would look like of that kind of business. So first thing we have to do is select the relationships for focus carefully. I want my top 10% customers having this conversation with me because that's going to retain the loyalty. I want to take my 20 or 30% of my expansion relationships. 20 to 30% of the relationships in your book of business probably have significant expansion opportunities. They're at a life cycle stage and a sales size where we simply haven't actually built, well, a deep enough understanding. We've been able to cross-sell more and more things which generate more loyalty. Or prospects. The best prospects who match the target profile of a good treasury user, a good deposit user, and somebody we want to lend money to. So select the relations for focus. Number 2, Before you walk in the door to have a financial operations conversation, you need to almost visualize exactly what the financial operations look like. We're going to break down financial operations into three general phrases. One, collections. Now, to the business owner, they don't think collections, they think receivables. All right, so I'm going to use the word collections for you bankers, but the truth is, as a business owner, I'm managing my receivables. If we look at the opposite end, we would say the other thing we could talk about is disbursements. However, for me as a business owner, I'm thinking about my payables, and I'm using multiple ways or processes of handling my payables. All right, we're going to call that, however, disbursements in our conversation today. Then in the middle, we've got what I do with my cash, when I have too much cash, when I don't have enough cash, how do I move the cash and track my cash through my business, know exactly where I stand on a given morning or a given afternoon with that cash. We're going to call that the cash management. The better phrase to use today would be my working capital management process. So that's the phrase we're going to use, working capital management. All right, so I have to anticipate the collections, disbursements, and working capital management model that this business owner is probably using on this call. Then I'm going to use a set of questions, which we will call the cash cycle review questions, on the call to validate the visualized view I have of what their collections, disbursements, and working capital probably look like that I did as part of my call preparation. I'm going to need to validate or verify that view. As a result of that, I'm going to be able to create literally a picture. So it says, review the confirmed cash cycle map with the client. Up here it says, use the blank map during the call. We'll get to all of that in a second. I'm going to actually map out, as we talk, exactly what this looks like in this business owner's perspective. All right? Business owners are, generally speaking, visually oriented, not auditorially oriented. As somebody said to me once before, as we talked about, why would you ever build a map that makes you look stupid? Or someone once said to me, having a picture is kind of sophomoric. This isn't about you. This isn't about proving how sophisticated you are. This is about proving that you understand, and the way you understand is when the business owner says, I see clearly now what I'm doing, and I see that you see the same thing because we're both looking at the same map, the same picture. Then I'm going to ask for a commitment to come back and present an optimized view of this financial operations process this business owner is using. When I go back to the bank, I'm going to sit down with my sales leader or my treasury management officer, here we'll just call it TMS, with my treasury management officer, and we're going to take a look at what we can and can't do, how we may or may not be able to optimize this. Then we're going to come back with a new map, which is optimized for where this business is not only today but down the road. And then we're going to put together a full-blown proposal, and we're going to try to pull through whatever needs we uncovered, whether they be a line of credit need, for example, an equipment loan need, or whether it be something that's going to facilitate their accounts payable or their accounts receivable. It's going to improve some aspect of their collections, disbursements, or working capital management. Here they are. 8 steps, man. Follow the process. No shortcuts. However, the caveat is this. You can't really do one of these calls that we're going to call a financial operations call, because that's where the financial operations discussion takes place, unless you have completed a business operations meeting in the last 3 months. And that's what we talked about in our last webinar. And if you're not sure what that looks like, I'm going to show you in just a couple of minutes a template here. I'll put it up on the screen right now, which says first meeting with prospects, a business operations discussion, and it'll give you a chance to go back and take a look at typical objectives for that meeting, the kinds of things you'll have to do to lead through those multiple objectives on the meeting, and so you end up with a good, solid look at the business operations. So we're going to send you a copy of that. You should have gotten it already this morning. All right, let's start digging into these 8 steps now. All right, here we go. There's 2 things that we will call key elements of this 8-step process. One is the cash cycle map, and you'll see the word map, cash cycle map actually, appears everywhere there is a red ellipsis. There's one there, there's one there, there's one there, there's one there, and there's one there. This thing shows up everywhere. But notice it shows up in 2 key places. One, in helping the business owner see more clearly what they're doing. which also, of course, helps you. But then when you get back to the bank, making sure that your peers who are going to help you optimize this thing, because we can't do this by ourselves, in the end, that peer can see more clearly what happened, especially if you do this the way that we're describing in these next few minutes. So the cash cycle map is actually used before the call to anticipate the needs, during the call to map the cash cycle. We then confirm it with the decision maker at the end of the call, share it with our folks back at the bank towards our optimization, and then present it as a before and after. And later on you'll see a blow-up of this, but in the materials that we sent you this morning, there is a blank copy of this map. And I encourage you to use it. Hey, use it in color too. It looks really cool. We actually have some clients right now who have tablets of these that they're actually taking out on these calls with them. All right. Let's go on to the next one here. You can't do the map without what we call this other key element called the review questions. All right, and this is a copy of the review questions that you'll see in just a couple of minutes blown up, which basically are used to confirm each step in their internal process, how they're handling their collections, how they're handling their disbursements, and how they're handling their working capital, whether they're short or long on the working capital side. In the end, these review questions are set up in such a way that it walks you through a very easy, logical to understand process. But it's not logical and understandable for you. I don't care about you that much. I care about the business owner. That's the one we're trying to partner with. It's what they need and what makes this conversation easier for them, not what makes you more efficient or makes you look smarter. You look smarter if you optimize their needs. All right, so the review questions, and these are used to confirm the current cash cycle, and then to make sure that you get the full picture of the cash cycle before you sell anything. We can tell people who don't do this well because they keep coming back from these meetings with a single product. Well, I went out and talked with this guy. He's processing a lot of checks, so we instantly started talking about remote deposit capture. That's as far as I got on this call. If they have remote deposit capture needs, I can guarantee they got 2 or 3 other needs that you never even got to. Follow the process. Get the full picture before you start talking about solutions. Used during the call to see how their financial operations may look, say, 3 years from now, not just right now. All right, so let's continue on here. Again, if we take a look at the keys to success in doing this effectively, you've got to make the business operations call before you make a financial operations call. This is what we do with a lot of our clients. You should be making a business operations call on selective relationships and prospects every 12 months. You never do this enough. And then a financial operations call to periodically review their collections, disbursements, and working capital needs. To periodically review, we would say every 12 months. And this is where you begin to find more and more of that loyalty. Yeah. So there we go. All right. These were your meetings from the first, were your meeting objectives for the first meeting, which we're going to pretend you already had in our example here. And you had these objectives for the meeting. I won't go through them all. This was part of our previous webinar. But notice at the end of this meeting, after having done an amazing job of understanding how their business objectives and business operations will change over the next year, next 3 years, you did an outstanding job of doing that. This person was so amazed, it ginned up so much interest that it was easy to get them to really focus on some short-term, mid-term, long-term needs that you then summarized and prioritized. We used the top prioritized need to get the next appointment within a few weeks. And as a part of that next meeting, we framed a financial operations discussion with the key parties, not with just the business manager. You do not have this conversation with just the office manager or the business manager. You've got to have both people in the room. You've got to have the VP of Finance and the president. You've got to have the business manager and the founding partner. You've got to have the real decision maker in the room when you do this. And believe it or not, if you frame this properly, you can pull this off. We're going to review the current cash cycle and to look for ways to optimize. This was all set up at the end of the business operations call. Now you're ready for the next meeting. Boom. And because you did such an amazing job on the business operations call, you learned all this information and got it confirmed about this engineering consulting firm. Here it is. You got all this detail, all worked out. You know exactly what's going on with these guys. It makes your financial operations call just so good. All right. We're going to take some of the things that we're talking about right now. Remember, this is where they go in your sales call process. We talk about calls as having these 5 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is where you plug in the question set. We plug in the business operations question set in our first meeting. We're going to plug in the financial operations question set in this meeting. So let's get that question set built. What you're going to see now is a series of steps. All right. The first one has to do with preparing for the meeting. All right. If you look up here, that's what it says, preparing for the meeting. All right, let me get rid of that so you can actually read it. Step 1, prepare a cash cycle map to select the questions. This is your preparation for the financial operations meeting. The purpose of this is to cognitively process. That's actually the code word that we use for visualizing what you're about to walk into. Hey, we're professional relationship builders. Just like a professional athlete, you don't just walk into an athletic event. If you've done your homework, you've actually rehearsed and visualized what you're going to do, because that visualization, that cognitive processing in the prefrontal lobe of your neocortex lights up the neural pathways that you will need to have all of your wits about you when you walk into this meeting. And that picture in your mind's eye, as you refresh it before the meeting, because you did all this homework, bingo! This is one of the things that differentiates you from your competitors who are planning their calls in the car on the way over, in the elevator on the way up. Now, we're not doing this with every client now, just the important ones. We're going to cognitively process the cash cycle before the meeting. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to prepare the questions for the meeting after we build the map. So here we go. How you do that? Prepare a map before the meeting, all right? Because it's not about matching the possible products or solutions to the possible needs. It's really all about this. Remember, we're not going to be focusing so much on the products right now. It's the business processes. So here we go. Understanding what you have to do, if you do this map correctly, it will line you up for this. Understanding the underlying business processes that are driving the collection, disbursement, working capital management processes of this business. All right? You'll see what that looks like in just a second. Anticipating implied and explicit needs. Needs the business owner can clearly see and knows about, but also some needs that they could just barely see or don't completely know about, not only in the current processes, but in the next 1 to 3 years. All right? Determining the questions you will use on the call to validate the map, and then identifying what we call the navigational question set. The questions you'll have to use to navigate all the way through in an organized, methodical way, the collections, the disbursements, and the working capital management, so that you lead the discussion and aren't led through it. And by leading it, you'll be able to listen more carefully for the intangible as well as intangible needs. So what do I mean by that? Well, this boils down then to step 2, having written objectives for the call. All right? And here they are. I'm not going to go through these one by one with you, but these look very similar to what we talked about in the business operations call. But notice we're going to frame a third meeting as one of these objectives, in a sense, to present the optimized view of what comes out of this call. So we have very clearly written out objectives, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that will enable you to light up those neural pathways that make this happen. Now, watch what happens here. Just a second here. We're going to blow up this map a little bit. Let me go back here. Actually, I should do that for you right now. Sorry about that. Come on. Clear up a little bit. Hello. We're going to, in the end, I skipped over one. We're going to take this map right here. We're going to actually fill in what we think the collections look like, the disbursements look like, and the working capital management. You'll see a blow-up of this in just a couple of minutes, but I wanted to, before we get too far into this, I want you to see what we meant by the preparation. You're going to prepare one of these before you ever walk in the door. Now, we're going to give you a good large copy of this. Let me put that up on the screen for you right now. All right, there it is. If you go to the lower left-hand corner of your screen, I'm looking at this map now at 104%. Here's what I'm really talking about. And if we call this a review and optimization map, up here you would see it say, here's the collections, here's the disbursements, here's the working capital management piece in here. And before I walk in the call, I'm going to try to figure out, given the type of business this person's in, what are they probably, who are their clients? How are they getting paid by those clients? What percentage is coming in through this system, or that type of a system, or that type of a system? And then down here, I'm saying, well, what are probably their largest expenses in a professional firm? It's payroll. How are they probably handling their payroll? It's probably travel. How are they handling those payments for travel? What are their internal processes for doing that? How are they handling their vendors? And once I begin to get a feel for that, I'm anticipating again. I'm anticipating what their working capital management looks like, what they probably do if they have periodically run short of cash, if they have too much cash, how they're pulling money out of the business. All that stuff I'm anticipating before I ever walk in the door. All right, so let me go back to the presentation here for a second, and we're going to skip ahead here. Come on. There we go. All right. So give me 1 second here. I'll get caught up with myself. There it is, and there it is. All right. So now we've prepared the map. We've written our objectives. All right. Now the next thing is I have to frame this call. One of the single biggest mistakes we see people make when they try to do this is they go in here and they start to ask some of these questions, and they're questions which aren't totally familiar to the business owner. They might be more familiar to the controller, but they're not that familiar to the business owner. So all of a sudden the business owner is getting kind of antsy and itchy, if you like, and saying, where's this going? What's this really all about? Well, the reason that happens is because the banker never really framed the discussion. You have to frame the discussion when you make the appointment, then you've got to reframe it when you arrive to have the conversation, and usually it's a good idea to review some of the business operations conversation you had and then turn around and frame this sequence of events that we're about to lay out here that will get you to your meeting objectives, so that the business owner knows what your objective is and what's in it for them. Framing means this: dear sir or madam business owner and controller, I'm about to ask you a series of questions here which I haven't asked you a lot of in the past, and I want to make sure you understand, here it is, what I'm going to do, why I'm going to do it, and what's in it for you to take this ride with me. Here's what you get out of it. So as you take a look at this framing statement, we call this a framing statement, it might sound like this. And I'm giving you this as a template. It's in the materials in that Word document that I showed you a second ago, too, so you can edit it. But in the end, go ahead and use it like a template and edit. As a relationship manager, I have an opportunity to work with companies in a wide range of industries. Over the years, I've found that most companies are well-versed in their credit needs, but seem less focused on the importance of managing their payments in cash. Time after time, I found that a periodic review of a business's overall cash cycle can ensure the best possible use of its cash. And with today's continually changing economy, making the best and safest use of those deposits and that cash cycle has never been more important. With your permission, I'd like to spend a few minutes exploring three areas. One, how your payment and disbursement processes are working today, how you're managing working capital today, and how your cash cycle may change over the next year or two based on those changing business operations we discussed in our previous discussion. My objective is not to offer you a quick solution, but to get a thorough understanding of how you manage your cash. With that information in hand, I may even develop some suggestions for optimizing the elements of your cash cycle. May I ask you a few questions? They almost never say no. That last paragraph here, my objective is not to offer you a quick solution, is your way out of being a product knowledge expert. Don't feel like you have to have a solution to everything that comes up. You're better off gathering up 3 or 4 things that could be optimized that come out of this conversation and going back to the bank and sitting down with your treasury management folks and really working through legitimate real-life ways to optimize this than throwing some quick superficial product knowledge at these people too early. So this statement right here gets you off the hook for that product knowledge. So now we've framed the discussion. They say go ahead. Here we go. What we're going to do is now we're going to take out the map. Literally, take out the map. Step 4, use the map. Completing the map as you discuss the cash cycle helps the business owner and the key parties see the processes they have built. Remember, this is not about you. It's not sophomoric. It's not stupid for you to do this. This isn't about you. It's what they can see about their own cash cycle, how they're handling these things. That's all it's for. And they're more visually oriented. They do much better when they can see a picture. So by doing this, we're making the current and future needs more explicit and more tangible for them so that the RM and the key decision makers can see the whole process more clearly together and have the same picture in their mind when this call is finished. That's what the map is for. And we've got people out there at banks right now who've been doing this for 2 or 3 years, and they say the single most important part of this is doing this map and showing the map to the person in advance, saying, here's what I'm going to do, and here's why I'm going to do this map in front of you. All right? Now, the key to this map, though, is not only filling in some of those boxes about, how are you taking electronic payments today and so on, but also listening for what they think is working and not working. And there's a note section down here at the bottom of this map. Let me go back right down in here, where it's really wise for you to take notes where the business owner can see it. So, for example, I put a note here about where they're currently banking. I put a note here that says that they're already clearly getting paid by certain types of entities in certain ways. They're very concerned about security, and what they really meant by security was embezzlement. They kept coming back to that theme again and again and again. All right? Whoops, sorry about that. They review their, I just made another mistake here. They review their payments every morning and look at the posted payments and then pick up the phone and call the bank if there's one they don't like on there. Whoa, that's a problem. They want access anytime, any place with security. They place a premium on convenience and ease of use. Their current system seems to be internet banking, and it seems to be working for them. All right? They seem more focused, and said they were more focused on managing their profession than they are managing their day-to-day business processes. They've been looking for experience, expertise, and responded to a whole concept of simplification. Those are the kinds of intangibles that we are going to need to have in our proposal that will help that, in the optimization technique. All right. Let's go on here then. So now we've got the map in front of the client. Now the questions come. Now you wrote these questions before you walked in the door, right? Because the questions navigate you, and we call these the review questions. And on this handout that I'm going to give you here, I'm going to take you there right now, you will see that we have all the questions outlined for you. We would encourage you, if you take a look at this template right here, the Financial Operations template, here's your meeting objectives. Here's the questions that you will ask that will help you to navigate the second meeting, including the framing statement right here, followed by the question sets right down through here. All right, so you've got a template to work from. So we go back here, we're going to say, well, here they are blown up. And we're going to start with, first of all, follow your plan, man. Do not deviate from the plan. Do this in a methodical, step-by-step way, the way the map works and the way these people's brains work. This is not about your brain, it's about theirs. So start with an understanding the collections and disbursements. That's their single most favorite topic, man. So here it is. For a professional practice, for example, I would modify the first question to sound like this. In our last meeting, we discussed your customer base and some of the niches or segments that were significant in your top-line revenue. To start our discussion about your financial operations, could we look at how those customers pay you? For example, what percentage pays by check, by credit card, electronically, any other? And then they start talking about that. Well, just out of curiosity, what kinds of terms do you extend to your customers? Now, I'm asking that question because later on, when it gets to the working capital management, we're going to look at the terms on the receivables, but also the terms on the payables, and that will lead us into a conversation later on, not now, of how they manage those shortfalls or extensions. Then we turn around and notice I don't go into immediately the cash management. I go to the opposite end, the thing that's second most important to them. As you look at the expense side, all right, what are your largest expenses, and typically what type of payment process do you use for them? In the professional practice we used as an example here, the largest expense is payroll. So you don't say to them, gee whiz, do you have group banking? That's absurd. That is a banker question. I'd instead ask this. Well, if payroll is your largest expenditure, your largest expense, can you just describe for me quickly the payroll process that you're using? For example, do you prepare your payroll yourself? Does your bookkeeper? Do you use a third party? Does your CPA do it? find out how they're handling the process from beginning to end of payroll. And what you soon figure out is most of these professional practices, as an example, are using a third party, typically Paychex or ADP. And in the end, Paychex and ADP don't care whether you send out checks or direct deposit. And if it's direct deposit, they don't give a flip whether or not you've got group banking at your bank. But the question is this: would direct deposit through a group banking thing be of any value to this business owner, given the kind of business they have? Don't answer that now. Wait till you see the whole picture. All right? For example, what percentage of your expenses are paid by check, credit card, electronically, online, any other? Their second biggest expense, they then say, is travel. Well, just out of curiosity, can I ask you how you're handling those travel expenses? What's your process for doing that? Oh, everybody has an American Express Platinum card. No kidding, a Platinum card. You know, every professional practice I talk to would seem to say, well, not every one, I guess the number is actually about 55 to 60%, would say that they really prefer American Express and the Platinum card over Visa and MasterCard. And I always say to them, so why? Well, because of the points. And then because of the fact it doesn't require financial statements, and there's no line of credit attached to it. Oh, so start thinking about that before you start putting P cards out there. All right? So the name of the game here is understand the processes they use for their payments. Out of curiosity, what kinds of terms do your suppliers extend to you? There we go. We're building toward that working capital piece now. Now we go on to the next set. Now we're going to go back into the middle. Now understand their process for managing their cash. Now I'm not going to go through each of these questions here, but I'll pick a couple of the key ones here. For example, would you take a few minutes to explain how your payments move through your business once you receive them? Who touches the payment? What accounts are used? How do you move your funds from account to account? How much time does your staff spend each week managing your payments in cash? That has to do with, and everybody that we're calling on should be using either what we'll call upscale internet banking, which is usually dumbed down cash management and not consumer internet banking, or they should be using regular cash management services. This is my way of finding that out, and if they aren't electronically connecting all this stuff together, why the heck aren't they? So in the end, this is my way of finding out things about information reporting and their sophistication in terms of how they manage those internal processes. Once I have that under my belt, I move on. When you have excess cash, how do you handle it? For example, when your cash level reaches a certain level, do you invest it for the business or move it into your personal life? Hey, these subchapter S professional practices, LLCs, man, they're pulling money out of these things at will. Do your cash needs change throughout the year? How is your cash needs for the next 6 to 12 months? Beyond that, there we go now. We're getting into the working capital situation. When your payables or payroll exceed your cash on hand, what do you typically do? I laid the groundwork for that in questions 2 and 4. Do you ever extend credit to your customers? Do you ever need to finance your receivables? How do you handle the finance to your large purchases? As you identify idle cash balances available for interest-earning deposits, what is most important to you, rate of liquidity or availability, and why? And how that will affect some of the choices you make in the future. And then we continue on here, and we end up with 16 questions. Hey, guys, when you learn how to do this and practice this enough, here's what the Greenwich data shows. We have some clients who have proprietary Greenwich research done. And when the Greenwich folks ask these business owners where this has been done, the response is, that was an outstanding discussion. I don't know why my banks don't always have this conversation with me. I learned a lot. My business manager learned a lot. And in the end, this was extremely worthwhile. This is called the beginning of loyalty, man. This is called adding value. All right? So we've now asked all of the questions. There's 16 of them, and they should be asked in this sequence. So it says up here now, understand their current solutions for managing their cash. Look what we do here at this one. What type of deposit accounts do you currently have in place? You never ask somebody early on in this conversation, where is your checking account today? Is it at Wachovia? Is it at SunTrust? Forget that. We'll get to that when we get down to 14, 15, and 16, when you've earned the right to see what your poor competitor that you're about to undo hasn't done. All right? So in the end, we save these questions till the end. And then do you have other deposit investments in place with whom? Away from your primary bank? Ooh, there's other opportunities here that even the current bank doesn't know about. What new products have you considered in the last 6 months, for example, remote deposit capture, cash concentration, reconciliation? Because if they've already considered these and rejected them, find out why before you start opening your mouth about these solutions. All right. Now, step 6, get agreement and next steps. Now you've completed the map with them. All right, you've gone through this, and you're never going to fill in every little element here. That'll come if you ginned up enough interest. They're going to give you account analysis statements right about now. Then you go back to the bank and fill that in with your treasury folks and really get a good diagnostic view. But what you've got right now is the overview as well as the intangible comments. Having completed the cash cycle review questions and maps, show the map to the business owner. Think total relationship. Do you see any better alternatives than they are currently using? The answer is almost always yes. Now, don't forget to look down the road for the next 1 to 3 years and see how that's going to change and where you can add value there. Now, do you see any ways to optimize that cash cycle? That's what we're going to do. As the business owner, if you got an accurate and full picture of the financial operations, ask for a meeting to present your recommendations for an optimized cash cycle. This is step 6. All right? And in the end, I can guarantee you'll get another appointment. But in those, remember the intangibles we talked about in the past. You have to put the tangibles in alignment with the products. You don't talk about positive pay without talking about how the positive pay can reduce can increase security, reduce embezzlement, for example. All right, so in the end, don't forget to pull those intangibles in as you talk about optimization. So what we've gotten now is we've gotten through 6 steps. The only final 3, which we're not going to talk about today, is when you take this back to the bank. There are 8 steps in this process. Here they are. You follow the process. Now go meet with a TMO, a Treasury Management Officer, and get the cash cycle optimized. And that is these steps right down here. Review the cash cycle map with the TMS or sales leader, with your TMO or sales leader. Present the proposal to your client using the revised cash cycle map. Open the accounts and pull through the balances. All right, so that is now, I know you know how to do that stuff. I'm worried about this stuff up here, and that's why we spent this time developing those 6 steps to accomplish these 5 parts of this process. All right? So what we've done is we've walked you through a series of steps here of how you can have a financial operations conversation, and I will go back to the Greenwich data. When we take a look at the response from people in these proprietary market research questionnaires, where with our clients who are using this process, the words we hear from those clients and those prospects are words like outstanding, highly effective. Why aren't all banks doing that? Why haven't my other banks been doing this? I can only tell you, folks, this stuff works. Think like the business owner, and that means understand their business operations and understand their financial operations. There should be one other slide that you have here, which I'm not going to go through right now. But if you decide to do this, and it will take practice, don't misunderstand me, it will take practice, and as you practice it, you're going to see some issues that block your consistent success. And these are the 7 issues we have seen. We've got banks that have been doing this for 3 or 4 years, and these are the issues that come up that you have to work your way through. But if you work your way through these, you'll be amazed at the results that you get and the loyalty that you build. I'm going to stop here right now, and I'm going to say that that's the end of our presentation, so to speak. If you haven't checked your email this morning, you should have received a copy of this presentation, and you should also have received this thing I've been referring to periodically here called the Quick Reference Guide, where we show you the first and second meetings with prospects, where we use a business operations discussion and a financial operations discussion to gin up the interest to get you back in the door for the 3rd and 4th meeting. I can only tell you, if you do this the right way,